Hi guys. This is just a little helpful tutorial to talk you through how to score the spelling inventory data from the Words Their Way spelling assessment. And I'm using the 6th edition, so if I refer to page numbers, this is the text I'm talking about. Some of the forms that you'll need are on page 30, there's a power score chart that is one of the pages you'll need to refer to. And also on pages 30 through 33 are the instructions on how to score. So if you want to look at that yourself and read that information. Also, we're going to be using the primary spelling inventory. So I'll show you that in just a minute, but that's on page 319 in the 6th edition. And also on page 320 is the scoring form that we'll use. It's called a feature analysis guide. And so you'll need that form. So if you'll get all those pieces ready, it will make it easier as we go through the process. Okay. So let me show you what the forms look like. First of all, you can see here we have the primary spelling inventory. It looks just like a regular old spelling test. And so you might be thinking that's what it is, a spelling test, but it's not. It's an inventory. It's an informal assessment that helps us to identify a child's spelling stage of development. And from that, we can identify specific spelling features that they're ready to learn how to spell. So it's a way for us to differentiate that instruction. And so this is the list we're going to use. There's actually 3 different spelling inventories. The primary is appropriate for kindergarten through 3rd grade. And then the elementary one is appropriate for 1st through 6th grade. It kind of skips that lowest end of the spelling stage of development. And so if you're not really sure and you're working with a younger child, 1st grade, 2nd grade, I would use the primary, not the elementary. That way you make sure that you cover all your bases. So you can see here I have a sample of a child's spelling test, and it's not a test, it's an assessment. So this is their data, this is the raw data, okay? And we're going to put that into the form to analyze it. And I'll show you what that form looks like here. This is, let me see if I can rotate it. Just a moment. Okay, so here is what the feature analysis guide looks like. This is what you'll actually put your scoring on when you're taking your raw data from your spelling assessment and putting it into the form. And again, we're using the primary spelling inventory feature guide because we are using this spelling assessment, which was done from the Words Their Way primary spelling inventory. Okay, so make sure that you have the right form to go with the right word list, essentially. And so what happens is, as you're going through the list, you will take the spelling data, and I'm going to try to put it side by side here, see if I can make that work. So you'll take the spelling data and you'll put it into this form. So the first thing that you do is just write the words, if they misspell it, out beside the words so that it's easier for you to score. If they spelled it correctly, you don't need to do that. You'll know that they spelled it correctly because nothing's written there. And so the way that this form is set up, let me just kind of go over that for just a minute. The way this form is set up is the words become progressively more difficult. The spelling features within the words becomes more difficult as you progress through the list. So it's really important that you start at the beginning and not skip words, just go through, have them spell them the best they can. I'm not going to get into all those details because mainly we're just going to talk about in this training on how to score it. But so we want to make sure we have enough data to score accurately. So once the assessment's complete, away from the child, you don't grade this with the child or anything, you will look at this form and you can see that the spelling stages if I can zoom in on this, the spelling stages are actually at the top of the form. You'll see that it has the emergent stage, and then it says letter name alphabetic, and then within word pattern, and then syllables and affixes. They don't have the fifth spelling stage here because this primary form is going to only cover those first 4 stages. So if you had someone at the higher end, you'd use a different spelling inventory. So the way this form is set up, we're literally going to give them points for each spelling feature that they get correct in a word when they spell it. And by spelling features, we're talking about things like, you can see consonants here. So initial consonants are a category that they can get points for. Final consonants they can get points for. The short vowel sounds in the word, if they spell those correctly, those are features that they get points for. The digraphs that are listed here, the blends, the common long vowel spelling patterns, and then the other vowel spelling patterns, which are your diphthongs and your are controlled and things like that. And then inflected endings, things like the IES and the doubling the consonant and all that kind of stuff. So basically on this form, you'll see sometimes there's a letter in the box and sometimes there's not. If there's a letter in the box, that means that's a scoreable feature. So if they get that correct and there's a letter in the box, you just put a check mark next to it, they get a point for that. And then for each word, we would come across and give them points. I'm going to see if this will let me do a little bit of marking on here. So, so basically on the word fan, if we look at our sample, we saw that they spelled fan correctly. So I would give them a point for that F at the beginning and that final consonant N at the end, and then also for that short vowel sound A in the middle. So they would actually get 3 points as far as don't want to, I'm not that talented with this. So they would get 3 points for this features they spelled correctly, right? And then they would get 1 more point for being able to spell the word correctly. So they get 3 feature points for those 3 spelling features in the word, the initial consonant sound, the final consonant sound, and the short vowel. And then they also get 1 word for spelling it correctly, 1 point. Okay, and you would literally go through the whole assessment this way. If they got 2 of the spelling features and maybe not the medial vowel sound, then you would give them 2 points for, like, let's say pets, they put pat. I think that's what they did on the sample. So I would give them a point for the initial consonant P and the final consonant T, but for the E, since they put an A, I would just mark a note here that they said the letter A, that they wrote the letter A, and I would not give them a point. So then they would get 2 points as far as features that they got correct in the word, and then they would get 0 points for spelling the word correctly. Oops. So you can see how that would work. And we would literally go word by word, line by line, and giving them points for all of the features they got correct. Sometimes you might notice them spelling words in like they're reversing letters if they write a B instead of the D and things like that. In lower elementary, that's pretty common, and we're not going to consider that a spelling error. We're going to consider that a handwriting error. So we would still give them credit. We would still give them the points. One of the things we look for is things that they're using but confusing. So in a word like hope, they get points for getting the initial H, the initial consonant, the P, the final P sound, and then this long vowel spelling pattern that has the silent E at the end. Let's say they spelled that H-O-E-P. They got the silent E in there, but not in the right order. That's a reversal. For younger elementary, we would give them credit for that they knew it needed the E. We call it using but confusing. It's something they didn't get it in the right spot, so we wouldn't give them credit for spelling it correctly, but we would give them credit for knowing that it needed the E. So when we're looking for areas for instruction, that's one of the kind of things that we look for, is things that they're using but confusing. It's kind of an indicator that that's in their zone of proximal development, that ZPD that Vygotsky talks about. So we know that they are ready to learn about that. They're trying, they just don't have it quite yet. So again, we would go through and score this. I'm going to show you one that's already been scored now. So I'm going to scroll down. Let's see, stop annotating. And this is one that's been completely, hang on, first I need to clear my stuff. Okay. And so you can see one that's been completely scored. So you can see how I write the word out to the side, and if they get the feature correct, I give them a check mark. We give them the points over here. If they spell it correctly, we give them a point over here. I did checks and drew lines. You could put like a 1 and a 0 to show either they got a point or they didn't get a point. I still added it down here at the bottom. So you can see that if they put the wrong vowel, then I might even write that in the box to show what they did. I didn't always do that on this example. Like pet, they put pat. It's helpful if you write the vowel that they actually wrote, and then you can get a quick comparison of the two and see things that they're confusing. But again, you can see this is how the child spelled the words on that writing sample that I had, the sample, the data. And so I've just converted that over to my form to make it easier for me. And once there's no longer a letter in the box, that's no longer a scoreable spelling feature, even if they get it correct. So you can see that for the first 7 words, they could get a point for the initial consonant sound. After that, even if they get the initial consonant sound, it's not worth any points. And that's really just because after they've done 7, you pretty much know that they have mastered that skill, but you don't want to have so many numbers and things to add up that it would make it cumbersome to complete the form. So again, with the final consonants, there's 7. You can see here when he wrote Rob, he actually reversed the D and wrote Rod. So I gave him credit, even though that, because I'm going to consider that a handwriting issue. But I wrote a D out here to remind me that maybe I want to keep an eye on that and see if the child's doing that frequently. We might need to talk about that. You can see later on in his writing, he doesn't reverse it, so it's not like it's a huge issue. As we've worked farther down the list, you can see that the spelling features that they get credit for are more advanced features. We're getting into digraphs, those consonant digraphs and the consonant blends, and then the common long vowel patterns, and then these other more advanced spelling patterns and such. And so once I have gone through the list, a couple of examples are like let's look at chewed. They get credit for the CH and the EW and the ED, and the only one of those they got correct is the CH consonant digraph. They didn't get that vowel, the vowel pattern there, the vowel digraph or the inflected endings. So anyway, so you can kind of see as you go through here some interesting spellings, like the word dream, where they actually spell it with a JR. This tells you really interesting things about what they're hearing and how they're articulating as they sound out these words. And so you can work on things like that by noticing this. Another one like tries, they put tries. And so you can see that they're hearing, they're very similar. And this assessment's designed to kind of pick up on those things. So anyway, after we've scored each word across the rows, we go down and we total up the columns. So for each one of these, there's 7 possible in each column. So initial spelling features, there's 7 possible, final consonants, 7 possible, short vowels, 7 possible, and so on. And so what we do is we total how many they got correct. So you can see in this example, they got 7 out of 7 of the initial consonants, 7 out of 7 of the final consonants, 3 out of 7 of the short vowels, and then 7 out of 7 of the consonant digraphs, and 5 out of 7 on the consonant blends, and then the rest of them 0 out of 7. Common long vowels, other vowels, inflected endings. If you look at their writing, you can see a lot of real literal spelling. That's indicative of that letter name alphabetic stage where everything's very concrete and literal. And so it kind of makes sense the way they spell things. And so in this example, it's not really a surprise that when we complete this, we find out that they are at the letter name alphabetic stage. But let me show you how we came to that conclusion. So first of all, we total up our feature points possible. They could have gotten 58 points. They got 29, so I total that up. And if I total it across this way, it should come up with the same number. So that's a double check for myself. And then we count how many words they spelled correctly, which they got 2 out of 26. So then I fill this in up here to tell me how many points they got for words spelled correctly, 2 out of 26. They got 29 feature points out of the possible 58. I add those two numbers together to give 31 out of total 82 possible. And then there's two ways that we identify their spelling stage of development. The first is just a little quick estimation. We go to the power score chart. So if you remember on page 30 of your textbook, it talks about this power score chart. And you can look on there. And let me see if you look on the power score chart that's on page 30. Let's see if I can get to that. Let me pause for just a minute and I'll see if I can show you that. Okay, let's pause it. Okay, so let me show you what the power score chart looks like. So here's our power score chart, and you can see that it kind of explains it in your textbook if you want to read about that. But basically they give you let me see if I can zoom in on it. Yeah. They basically have a chart for each of the different spelling inventories. Remember, we're using the primary, so we're going to use this list of numbers. And basically it says that if the child spells between 1 and 3 words accurately, then that would approximately say that they're in the middle letter name alphabetic, okay? Now, that's on one estimation of just how many words they spelled correctly. They can estimate that. So when I look at the chart, I know that my child in this example spelled 2 words correctly out of 26. So that's in this range. So I know that they're approximately at the middle of the letter name alphabetic stage. And so let me get... Okay, so when we look at this chart now, you can see I just wrote power score 2, and that I underlined this middle letter name alphabetic just to tell me that's what one measure says. Now, my second measure is a little more detailed, and I'm going to go from left to right, looking across the scores that they made in each column, and I'm going to look for that first big dip where they have an area that they did not score as high. So on initial and final consonants, they scored 7 out of 7, and then all of a sudden we see this dip at 3 out of 7. So they've missed several. So I'm just going to box around that column, and when I go up to the top of that column, that coincides also with this early to middle letter name alphabetic stage. So I'm trying to decide whether it's early or middle. I know it's somewhere kind of in there, and so that's pretty good. We don't have to be exact, but if I wanted to decide, is it more early or more middle, I could kind of look to the right of that and see how they did on these next couple of areas. And since they've completely mastered digraphs and most of the blends, I would venture to say that middle letter name alphabetic stage is accurate. So they do have a nice little chart in your Words Their Way book that lets you kind of ask some questions, and it helps you to decide on whatever spelling stage they're at, whether it's early, middle, or late. And so you can kind of use that questionnaire to help you make a more accurate indication. But so now that you might be thinking, okay, so now I know what spelling stage they're at, and I realize this is their first big dip. So clearly we want to identify something for instruction. That's the whole point of using this type of assessment, because it doesn't just tell us what they can and can't do, it also tells us how to choose things for instruction based on that information. So you might be thinking, well, they got 0 out of 7 in 3 categories over here, so those are a lot worse scores, so maybe I want to start there. But that's not the way we do it. We work from across the continuum from left to right. And so the first area that they show a need, that's the one that we want to target. That's in their ZPD, their zone of proximal development. So if I were working with this child, I would be focusing on these short vowel spelling patterns. So those CVC words, those consonant vowel consonant words that have those short vowels in the middle, helping them to hear those different vowel sounds, because they're obviously confusing them. And so we might go to that chapter that's on letter name alphabetic stage, and it would give us some great ideas about some different word sorts and things that we could do with this child to help them to start differentiating between like short A and short E, or short I and short E, and things like that. So we could create some word sorts to let the child practice that until they master that area. Then we'd work across to the next and the next. So that's basically how that works. And hopefully that will be helpful to you as you're working on scoring your own spelling inventory with the data that you have. So good luck.